Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're going to stick to my home county of Skåne here as well, in the very south of the country. For this one we are going to go back to a brewery who began their life over the water in Sjælland in Denmark, but more recently moved to Malmö here in Skåne, and they've been doing some very interesting beers recently, and this one I think is no exception to that rule. So for this review then we are going to go down to Malmö, like I said, and we're having a look at another beer from Rocket Brewing Company. So this one is a Barleywine coming in at 8.7% ABV, and it is called the Hokkaido and Shiso. So it has Hokkaido pumpkins in it and Shiso leaves, which should be really quite interesting. The last beer that I had from these guys was called the Koji, and it was an imperial stout that was brewed using the kind of fungus or yeast, if you like, that's used to brew soy sauce and things like that as well. And that was a really kind of quirky, very interesting beer. So they seem to be doing a bit of a series there that is to do with Japanese cuisine and things like that. So obviously for me, with a Japanese girlfriend and half Japanese son and all of this, these things are really quite interesting. So yeah, I'll need to go and talk to Rocket Brewing Company and see what the whole inspiration behind this is. But hopefully this turns out to be another interesting beer, an 8.7% barley wine, as I say, with Hokkaido pumpkins and Shiso leaves added to it. So should be a very interesting one, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. Always nice to try new things from Rocket Brewing, of course. This beer was released as part of the June assortment of the local Småskoleague things that Systembolaget are releasing. So yeah, you will still be able to get this one fairly readily, I would think. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this beer then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Rocket Brewing Company before. No doubt there will be some more at some point in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you, and another one for all the Danish beers that I've reviewed for you. I guess this one will appear in both of those lists because it is a sort of dual nationality brewery. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Rocket Brewing Company then, on to my brewery notes. So Rocket Brewing Company, as I've told you already, are a Danish-Swedish brewery that were originally specialists in Brettanomyces and sour beers, but since, in more recent times of course, they've expanded to brew different styles of beer, and they are brewing more sort of normal beers, I guess if you can call them that, but they are also brewing very quirky things like this and the Koji. But yeah, this company was originally founded back in 2014 by 5 people. The 3 full-time partners were Kim Agersten and Thomas Schoen, who were the brewers, and then there was also Ulrik Lerskov Schmidt, who was dealing with the admin side of things. So they were joined by 2 other partners. This was Martin Mostrom, who dealt with the design, and also Martin Hogild, who was dealing with the concepts, and both of them were dealing with the brewery's marketing and social media as well. So Kim was the chef at Melke and the Hurrikar restaurants in Copenhagen, and they began brewing their beers quite intensively there. And Kim also participated in Mikkeler's tasting panel, and it was there that he met Thomas Schoen, and they did a test brew on the big scale as well, and that was where it all really kicked off. But since all of the owners liked sci-fi, they decided to name the brewery Rocket Brewing Company. But unlike many Copenhagen brewers, these guys actually had their own brewery, which is located in the small town of Haslev, or it was located I should say, but the brewery was an old abattoir with a 260-metre floor space, and they had a 500-litre brewing system there as well, and they said essentially at that time that they were the world's biggest home brewery. But as of May 2015 they had a fermentation capacity of around 13,000 litres, so when they were over in Denmark they were a very small scale brewery actually. But they decided to move to Sweden, and they established themselves in Malmö. and they released their first beers through the Swedish brewed system, or through the Swedish system in Systembolaget in late 2018. So there's since been a change in the structure of the ownership of the company as well. So the current owners are Kim Agerston, who is the main brewer, Joel Carlson, who is also involved in the brewing, but he does the sales and PR side of things as well. And there's also Aaron Halborg, who is the label designer, Carl Anderson, who does sales and finance, and then there's also Rikard Zetterberg as well, who's also involved in the sales side of things. But at the moment they are expanding their capacity. The beers have been selling quite well over here in Sweden, and as of June 2020, when I'm producing this review for you, they've produced in the region of 150 different kinds of beers. And as I say, they seem to be releasing 1 or 2 different ones every month. I think there was also an IPA released this month through Systembolaget as well, but when I saw this one was a Barleywine and it was another one from this kind of Japanese series, I decided that this was the one I was going to order as part of my kind of monthly series of Swedish beers that I do actually. So yeah, really curious to see how this one turns out, like I say. But I've had some really nice beers from these guys. I have been speaking to Rocket Brewing over Instagram and things like that, so you will see these guys feature on a Meet the Brewery segment at some point fairly soon. I need to organise that with them and see about getting that filmed. So yeah, a nice little brewery, this one, definitely interesting. I need to talk to them a bit about why they decided to move over here to Sweden, of course, rather than stick in Denmark, because I would have thought their laws over here would be a little bit more restrictive, but they have established themselves well over here, and things seem to be going really well for them. So yeah, long may that continue, and I'm curious to see what beer they release next month. So yeah, that's all you really need to know about Rocket Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more, of course, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and of course you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. There you can see the artwork on this is a little bit kind of unusual. I don't know if it's a slightly different artist on this one. I think the bottle's sweating a little bit and making the label warp a wee bit. But yeah, there you can see pumpkin. Looks a little bit kind of Halloweenish. I'm surprised they didn't release this for Halloween or something like that. But then again, I guess maybe the pumpkins and the shiso leaves might not have been available. This beer is a sort of collaboration of sorts with Syrtanten again, who are a company in Malmö that do a lot of, you know, fermentation type stuff. They make kimchi and gherkins, like fermented pickles and all of this kind of thing. And then Landet Os is a farm here in Skåne somewhere. I think they're up by Hör, actually. I think they're a wee bit to the northeast of me here in Lund. But there you can see the Rocket Brewing Company symbol as well. And yeah, I don't know if Mima is maybe the artist that's done the label artwork for this one. But yeah, it says here on the side, this special brew is a barley wine made with 2 very special ingredients. The beautiful Hokkaido pumpkin contributes a smooth honey flavour. Wouldn't have thought that. And the fermented shiso leaves adds a herby and almondy note to it. We imagine this beer being drunk to a sweet dessert or as a dessert. So they've written "ok" as a dessert. I don't know if that's a typo there. If you look at that, they've kind of used the Swedish "and" there on the top, which is quite funny. Don't know if that is a typo or not. But it says, part of the Mima programme, a series of beers brewed with ingredients cultivated by Landet Os, close to Malmö, and fermented or tampered with by Syrtanten. So yeah, okay, so yeah, this one, the Mima is the series of beers, it's not the artist. Okay, but yeah, it says, oh, the art on this one is by The Old Black Train. So yeah, I'll need to have a wee look at some of the stuff online then next time. But yeah, it says here, it says 8%, not 8.7% as well. I should have checked that actually before. I think I said 8.7% at the start of the video, but this one, I think it says 8.7% on Untappd actually. But yeah, this one is an 8% barley wine then with Hokkaido pumpkin and shiso leaves. Plain white bottle cap on this one. So without further ado, let's get this guy out and we will get on with the taste, and then very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So yeah, as I say, the Koji that I had from these guys before was a really quite quirky beer, so I'm curious to see what this one has in store for us. I can't say I've ever had a beer that's had I think I have. In fact, I think I maybe have had 1 or 2 pumpkin ales. You usually get these around Halloween and things like that. But I have to admit, I've never been such a big fan of the pumpkin ales. I mean, the one that we always used to get was the Brooklyn pumpkin ale. So yeah, but hopefully this one turns out to be a bit more kind of quirky and different. Actually, I quite like this idea of adding random adjuncts into the beers. And the last one, I have to say, the Koji was a really interesting beer, but the sort of soy sauce element to it wasn't quite as prominent as I was expecting. It wasn't quite as prominent as I've had in some of the Japanese craft beers that I've reviewed on the channel, actually. So yeah, but as you can see with this one, if we put the light through this beer, it's actually a really rich amber colour, this one, which is, you know, barley wines can be a variety of different colours. Some of them can be really like mahogany and chestnutty, some of them can be a little bit more like a very, very dark amber like this, but this is definitely one of the lightest looking barley wines that I've come across in my time doing beer reviews. Definitely one of the more amber leaning ones, I have to say. So some of the English barley wines, I think, can be this colour. The American ones do tend to be a little bit darker and, as I say, more mahogany, sometimes a bit more ruby. So yeah, this one, in terms of its appearance, I think it's a little bit more like an English barley wine. You could see that when we poured this beer, there was a quarter finger of a kind of creamy coloured head on this one, quite a bumpy head, but that's just faded away to be pretty much nothing. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of where the head should be in this one. But yeah, a very rich amber colour there. As I say, the you know, the colour of this one is a little bit surprising, but you know, if you know barley wines, it looks a little bit more like an English barley wine, and I guess in some ways it is a little bit more of the same alcohol percentage that you would expect of an English barley wine. Usually the American ones are at least, you know, 9.5%, usually they're going up towards 10%, but 8% I think you can get English ones that are normally around that. It's even, I think even some of the English ones are a bit stronger than that. The barley wine, of course, as a style is related to the double IPAs. You've got the pale ale, the IPA, the double IPA, and then the barley wine, and they're all related to each other through the malt to hops ratio. So the higher you go up that scale, of course, the higher in alcohol you get, and there is also more hops in there. I think the ratio actually gets smaller as you go up, but I'm not 100% certain about that. But yeah, basically as you go up the chain, there's more hops and more malt in these beers. But yeah, in terms of appearance, a little bit surprising, this one. So let's take a look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this beer. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, the first thing you are going to notice about this beer is that it does come across as very kind of herbal. I think if I was to, you know, smell this beer blindly, I would not think that this is a barley wine straight away. It's got a hell of a lot of herbal character to it. Yeah, it's got a lot of a herbal character. It almost comes across as being a little bit salty, to be honest with you as well. That's an interesting thing. It does have a little bit of a kind of brown sugary sweetness, so I can see why they would suggest honey as part of the aroma here. It almost comes across as a little bit, you know, it's almost a little, yeah, it's almost a little bit like maple. I see what they mean. It's like a little bit of a kind of mapley, syrupy, honey type aroma that comes out of this one. So yeah, it's almost like a bit of a kind of salty, caramelly kind of thing as well. There is that, I do get that kind of brown sugary note out of it, and there is that sort of herbally thing. I don't know if it's the herbally notes that are a bit more kind of salty, or if it's the kind of, or if it is the you know, or if it is the how do you say, if it is the kind of shiso leaves that, and I don't know if the saltiness is coming from the caramel or whether it's coming from the sort of herbally side of the beer. That's really interesting. But yeah, I see what they mean about the caramel. To me, it strikes me as a little bit of a kind of salted caramelly type thing. As I say, nice little bit of a herbal quality in there. The herbal notes are quite bright, and they come across as very kind of smooth in the aroma, I would say. But yeah, I like how the aroma in this goes together, actually. But yeah, you do get a bit of a kind of stronger caramel underneath that. You can tell the kind of pumpkin bit apart, because it is like an almost kind of herbally caramelly, a sort of herbally brown sugary note. But yeah, you've got a nice kind of bready base to the beer as well. Definitely a bit of a kind of brown bready quality, some sweeter caramel in there. You can smell the sort of herbally notes mixing in with that. And then yeah, you've got that sort of that lighter honeyish maple syrupy kind of thing from the pumpkins too. And it's all, as I say, it's almost just a little bit salty. I really like how that goes together. The aroma in this beer is really it's very interesting, very quirky in that sense. I do like how how that goes together. I don't think I would pick out that this is a barley wine from blind smelling it. I really don't think I wouldn't know what to think of this beer actually. This would be one of these ones where I would just have absolutely no idea. And this is why I love doing the beer reviews. You know, you're always going to get things like this that kind of mess with your palate a little bit and make you think a little bit. But yeah, so yeah, quite a malt, you know, a really malty smelling beer. This one really kind of really quite herbal in a lot of its characters as well. In terms of hops and things, you know, it's got a wee bit of earthiness to it. It's got a little bit of grassiness, but otherwise I don't think there's too much of a kind of hoppy presence to this one. It's almost got a little bit of a phenolic kind of cough syrupy type thing to it as well. So yeah, definitely a little bit of a phenolic cough syrupy sort of quality, as I say. But yeah, I like how that I do like how that goes together. I mean, yeah, there's a wee bit of that, you know, it's got a little bit of that almost kind of figgy, it's got a little bit of an almost figgy note to it. It's almost a little bit kind of like candied. It's got a little bit of that kind of candied strawberry kind of thing as well, which is interesting. But maybe a little bit, you know, like an apricot jam or something. A little bit like sultanas maybe. Sultanas is maybe a good description for this one. Like those kind of dried fruits. It really has a little bit of that kind of quality to it. Like dried apricots, a little bit of a figgy note, a little bit of a sort of juicy, you know, a little bit of a kind of juicy, yeah, a little bit of a juicy kind of candied fruit thing there as well, which is interesting. So yeah, a really quirky aroma to this one. Take a little bit of time to enjoy that before you get stuck into the beer. I would say that the aroma in this one isn't the most kind of pungent or the most complex that I've come across, but it is quite a quirky one, so take a little bit of time to enjoy it. But maybe there's not all that much to kind of to reflect on in this one actually. So yeah, very quirky smelling barley wine this. I would definitely not pick out that this is a barley wine if I was blind smelling this, I have to say. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. This one is the Hokkaido Shiso, an 8% barley wine brewed with Hokkaido pumpkins and shiso leaves as a sort of collaboration between Landet Os and Syrtanten in here in Skåne as well. This beer of course comes to you from Rocket Brewing. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange skål. Ah. That's really it's actually, first impression of it is it really is quite dry and quite herbal, this one. So I think I got hair in my mouth somehow. But yeah, this one, first impression of this, it comes across in the flavour as a lot boozier than it actually is. You do get a hell of a bit of alcohol warmth out of this just down here. And the flavour comes across as quite dark and quite boozy as well, which is interesting. Yeah. Now this one, this is quite a quirky beer actually. What I'll say about this one is, in terms of its mouthfeel as well, it comes across as being a little bit of a sort of lighter barley wine. Normally you expect a barley wine to be very big and oily and chewy, and this one, it does have an element of that, but I don't know if it's just the fact that there are a few, you know, there's a bit of pumpkin in this one and there is the shiso leaves as well. It comes across as a bit lighter, and it really comes across as a lot more, you can feel it smoothing out the further you go into the aftertaste. It's definitely one of the kind of smoother barley wines, and it sort of feels smooth in the same way that like beans do inside. It's unusual to describe. It's definitely not the biggest and oiliest of barley wines that I've come across. Definitely not. Yeah, I really like how this one. I do like how this one goes together. This is definitely a very, very quirky beer in my mind. It takes you a little bit of time just to get your head around it, I have to say. But yeah, where do we start with this one then? So straight away with this beer, it actually starts to dry out a lot the further you go into the aftertaste as well. But yeah, straight away with this one, you can feel your the middle of your palate is just blanketed with this kind of, it does have a wee bit of breadiness to it, but it almost feels like if you have baked beans, it almost just feels you've got this sort of kind of, you've definitely got this kind of flavour that just, that this sort of feel that just blankets the middle of your tongue, and that'll be the pumpkins obviously. So the pumpkin-y sort of smoothness, if you like, that's what forms the baseline of this beer. It reminds me a little bit in a way of the same kind of vibe that you get from tonka beans, but yeah, that goes straight across the middle of your tongue, and you've got that kind of pumpkin-y smoothness just sitting there. If you move kind of, if you go to the centre of your tongue and then move forward a little bit, there is something just a little bit kind of darker and grainy in there, so that's, I think that'll be the herbal qualities. So yeah, you do feel the two main ingredients there, the Hokkaido pumpkin, that's forming the very backbone of the beer, and then further forward I think you start to get the more herbal qualities coming out of this one. So that's a really interesting, that's a really interesting kind of quality to this beer as well. Sorry, camera control is going a little bit crazy, I have to say. It just does that sometimes. But yeah, you really get that. The pumpkin is forming the backbone of the beer. If you go to the back third of the tongue, it's actually quite dry and almost quite bitter, the pumpkin side of things. So yeah, the beer does have a good bit of dryness and bitterness from the pumpkin and from the shiso leaves towards the kind of back of the tongue there. But yeah, as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, definitely has that kind of smoothness from the pumpkin, and I would say that in the middle of the palate it does sweeten up a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste as well. So there is a wee bit of an almost kind of caramelly-ish honey type element to this one. There is a little bit of an almost, I find that there is almost just a little bit of saltiness to the beer. It just feels almost a little bit kind of salty. A lot of Japanese food and things is quite salty, so it's not surprising that when it's Hokkaido and shiso leaves, two ingredients, that you're going, that Hokkaido pumpkin and shiso leaves, you know, these things that you are going to find in Japanese food. It's not surprising that the beer has a little bit of a salty edge to it. You know, a lot of Japanese food has a lot more, it does lean towards the kind of salty side of things in a number of ways. So yeah, I like that element of it. There is a wee bit of brown sugar, as I say, in the middle of the palate, sweet caramel, but then it does become a little bit more honey-like, like they were suggesting. It does become a little bit more like a kind of honeycomb type thing the further you go into the aftertaste. What I'll say about this beer is that in terms of its malt base and things, it's really not the most complex of things, but the flavours do fit together really quite nicely. But I guess when you want the focus to be on certain ingredients, you don't want the beer to be overly complex, to be honest, you know. Pardon me, getting a little bit of gas out of it. But yeah, you don't want the beer to be overly complex, and it certainly, it isn't that. It's it's one of these ones that's a bit simpler in terms of its composition, but it just fits together really quite nicely, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a really quirky beer, this one. It's not what you would normally associate with a Barleywine. If I think, you know, the comparisons of beers that I've had would be, this one is quite similar to some of the, in some ways it's got the same sort of vibe to it as some of the soy sauce beers that I've reviewed from Japan. So go and check out my Japanese playlist and you'll find some really, I'm sure actually I have had a beer from a brewery in Japan called Koji. There's quite a distinctive one that comes out every year, but the name of it's gone right out of my head just now. But yeah, this beer, that, you know, if I was blind tasting it, I might think that someone had found some kind of quirky Japanese beer for me, because yeah, this one, it's not a barley wine in the traditional sense, definitely not. And it's quite an unusual style actually to choose to mix these kind of flavours with, but it works, it actually does work quite nicely. So kudos to Rocket Brewing for trying something a little bit different. So yeah, really, if you like tonka beans, you know, if you like beers that have got tonka beans and stuff like that in them, this is probably one I think you will enjoy. I quite like the soy sauce beers that you get in Japan there. I like a really strong soy sauce. I've got a very strong flavour palette, I think. So yeah, I do enjoy these kind of beers, and this is one of the reasons why I like reviewing these ones for you on the channel as well. But in terms of the hoppy side of things then, in the back corners of the palate you've got a little bit of earthiness there. I'm not sure if it will be English hops. There might be an English hop in here, maybe like a Kent Golding or something like that. It does have a little bit of the darker earthiness you'd expect of English hops. As you come further forward along the side of the palate, it's definitely got a more kind of herbal quality which suits the shiso leaves, and as you reach the very front corners of the palate, it's got a nice slightly stronger floral aromaticity. Then round the very front curve of the tongue, it's just a little bit lighter and grassy. But then if we go to the front third of the tongue, that's where you get the nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters start to push their way out of the beer. And And yeah, I mean, the fruity side of this beer, it's quite straight up, to be honest with you. It's got a little bit, you can feel the herbal qualities. The front third of your palate really does dry out and become more herbal again the further that you go into the aftertaste with this beer. But yeah, there is a wee bit of that. It is more like kind of sultanas and things in there. There is almost a little hint of a kind of orangey quality to this one as well. Could there be a wee bit of like Amarillo or something? It does to me. There is just a little bit of an orangey, zesty, citrusy sort of thing in there. So yeah, there is a wee bit around the front edge of the tongue. It is a bit kind of orangey and zesty, but other than that, you do have a little bit of a kind of sultana flavour. There's maybe a little bit of a kind of candied strawberry or something coming out of this beer. So yeah, there's a few interesting elements to this one, but I like the kind of quirkiness of this beer, I have to say. But yeah, the fruitiness I think is straight up. A little bit of a sultana quality, a little bit of a you know, quite a little bit of a sultana quality to it, a little bit of an orangey zest I think further forward on the tongue, but yeah, the flavour of this beer comes across very, very nicely. It's a really very, very quirky beer, this one, and as I say, it's unusual to add these sort of random adjuncts into barley wines and things. So as I say, kudos to Rocket Brewing Company for doing something a little bit different, and I'm curious to see what else this kind of Mima series that they're doing throws up actually. So yeah, let's look at the mouthfeel then. So this one, yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel, I'd say it's a fairly mid-bodied beer. The carbonation's fairly light. It's got a bit of wetness to it. It's got a little bit of an oily character too. So I do like how that goes together. It's not the most oily of barley wines, like I said. It's actually quite light in terms of a barley wine. So definitely a mid-bodied beer. Carbonation smooth. A little bit of wetness to the mouthfeel, like I said. In terms of the bitterness and things, this one, it does have a little bit of bitterness to it. I think some of that comes from the herbal qualities from the shiso leaves, so I don't know if you can count that as IBUs, but I would say this one's maybe, it feels like it's got a bitterness of around kind of 50 IBUs or something like that, or 60, and I guess with this being a barley wine you can age it a little bit. It says on the bottle you can age this until 2022, so that, maybe I'm just drinking this one very early on, maybe you should let this mellow out a little bit. And then of course you might get more fruitiness and a bit more kind of caramel and all this sort of thing. But I was just very curious about this beer, so I wanted to have a go at it. So yeah, maybe it would mellow out and sweeten up a little bit as you go further on, but to me it feels like it's got about 50 IBUs, and that'll obviously drop off as you age it. The sort of malty side of things, it's really got that kind of smoothness to it, that sort of tonka beanie kind of vibe sort of thing. It really has that kind of beanie smoothness to it in the middle of the palate, which I quite like. A little bit of sweetness to it as well, a little bit of bitterness from the kind of herbal side of things as well, and you've also got just a little bit of a kind of fruity, juicy sort of thing, a wee bit of a citrusy zest, like I was saying, on the front edge of the tongue, and a little bit of an almost kind of berry quirkiness to it as well. So yeah, a really very, very kind of quirky beer, this one, in terms of the flavour composition. This is one of these ones you really just need to try for yourself. I can sit here and try and explain this flavour to you all day, but I think this is one that you really just need to have a go at for yourself. So yeah, if you can get a hold of this one, do try it, because it is very, very quirky and really quite unusual in my opinion. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. The Hokkaido and Shiso, an 8% barley wine with Hokkaido pumpkins and shiso leaves, brewed by Rocket Brewing Company in Malmö in collaboration with Syrtanten Syrade, who do a lot of different fermented things like kimchi and you know, different kinds of pickles and stuff like that, and then Land Os, who are a farm close by to Malmö. I'm sure they're up by Hur actually, I'm sure I've heard that they're up there somewhere. But yeah, a really quirky beer, this one, and one that I recommend you try for yourself. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this review then. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Rocket Brewing Company as well. I'm sure we'll return to these guys at some point in the future, and we'll try more from this Mima series that they've got going on. So yeah, very quirky beer, this one. This one was released as part of the June sortiment of the Locales Moscolate, so I recommend you have a go at this and see what you think as well. But if you like tonka bean beers, I think this is one that you might enjoy as well. This really does remind me of a lot of the kind of it has the same sort of vibe to it as some of these soy sauce beers that I've reviewed from Japan over the years. So go and check out my Japanese playlist as well and look for some of those and have a look for some of those soy sauce beers that I've looked at for you. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this. Thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Rocket Brewing Company once again, and I will catch you guys very soon. Until the next time, slàinte just now, and I'll catch you guys later. Slàinte, skål, cheers.